Hello, everybody. Michael Silver here, the event director for Enlit Australia, continuing with our series of interviews with industry leaders. Today we're with Sam Maresh, country leader for GE Australia. Prior to this position, he worked as senior director of government affairs and policy for Australia, New Zealand, and Papua New Guinea. And prior to that, he was chief advisor of government relations for Rio Tinto. Welcome, Sam.
Hi, Michael. Good to be here from my home office.
Yeah, we're glad to have you. Hey, to begin this conversation, I'd like to ask you a little bit about the short-term impact, from your point of view, the short-term impact of the pandemic on the energy industry here in Australia.
Yeah, it's been interesting, Michael. There's obviously been a lot of impacts for individuals and businesses, and the energy sector hasn't been isolated from those impacts. So what we've generally seen in Australia is obviously a deep commitment to safety and well-being of staff. So I think that's really shone through in the energy sector. We've also seen things such as scheduled maintenance and activities that, you know, the pandemic and the kind of constraints around movement and activities where things could be rescheduled, they were rescheduled. As the situation has improved and the economy is opening up again, we see a kind of a return to business as normal. So those things that have been deferred, people are coming back online and ensuring that the system, does what it needs to do.
So elaborating on what you just said, how do you think the Australian electricity industry in particular has reacted to the crisis?
Yeah, it's been how would I describe it? I kind of divided up into a couple of different sectors. From a market perspective, we've obviously seen a reduction in the spot market price for electricity as demand has come off. And so this whole pandemic is really about shifting demand. And we've seen that internationally, whether you look at commodities like oil, where demand has shifted radically almost overnight in a couple of weeks. But likewise, here in Australia, we've seen demand come off as, you know, people, you, me, everyone have been working at home. Some activities around industry have had to kind of wound back because of the pandemic. And that's had an influence on the market. So I suppose that's a very obvious impact. What's been great, however, is the sector by and large has been able to maintain what it does, which is provide safe, reliable, affordable electricity to customers. So right across the whole chain, the value chain of activity, I think the industry has shown great robustness in being able to deliver that. And that's something which we should all be thankful for, because it's, electricity is an essential service. We all need it. We notice it when it's not here. But right throughout this pandemic, I think the sector here in Australia has really kind of has stepped up and done a fabulous job at making sure, that those essential services can continue to be provided.
Yeah, I agree with that assessment. That's similar to my observation. So shifting from the short term, of course, we're in the middle of an energy transition. Do you see the pandemic having any long-term impact on the fundamental energy transition that we're going through right now?
Listen, I think there will be shifts and changes. You know, I honestly believe I break it into a couple of bits. One is, I think individuals, we've all seen an opportunity for a different kind of possibility in the energy sector. And I think whether that be through less pollution, whether it be through kind of a higher utilization of renewable energy, and we've seen during this pandemic, renewables actually, really servicing the grid much more than they might have done previously as business as normal. And guess what? The grid's been able to cope with all of that, which is fabulous. So I think whether it's locally here in Australia as we see these dynamics shift, whether it's the big global changes around oil and how that overnight kind of demand radically changed in that space, I think what people are seeing is there's this opportunity for a different electricity future. And I think what this pandemic has kind of demonstrated to all of us is, listen, it can be done. Now, lots more work has to go into making it be to making that transition and underpinning it. But I think it's probably brought us closer towards the transition and towards a reality where I think renewables in particular is going to make up a greater proportion of our electricity generation.
Yeah, that's a good point. And so kind of shifting gears a little bit more to the specifics of the transition. A lot of talk about hydrogen, as you well know, and you and I have talked about it in the past. I'm interested in the idea of or where the business is going in terms of hydrogen gas blends, driving turbines in generation plants.
Yeah, I think it's a good question, and certainly we've seen the Australian government launch their technology roadmap and make some big commitments to hydrogen, and I think Australia is just so well placed in terms of being an energy exporter, having a whole series of countries who demand our energy resources, and hydrogen being able to be that really versatile fuel to power both generation, transportation, and a whole lot of other activities that we rely on. So, from a generation point of view, gas turbine units that are already installed, they have capability to actually burn hydrogen. They can do it today. As you increase the volume of hydrogen, there are certain things you need to do from a point of view of ensuring the physics of the system are robust. But essentially, the pathway towards hydrogen, particularly as a fuel for peaking generation, is that pathway is there now. There's challenges around cost, and I think the government recognises that, and that's why it's got a roadmap which looks towards hydrogen as a fuel source when it gets to scale and when it gets to a cost comparative position.
That's fantastic. I don't know if you tuned into our hydrogen webcast last week. There was a lot of talk about those very topics. If you get a chance, check it out in the archives. So my final question, Sam, is from a broader perspective, as we emerge from this crisis, what are GE Australia's plans for this market going forward?
Well, listen, I think the crisis hasn't necessarily changed, our view of this market. We're really excited by the Australian market from the point of view of the transition and the point of view of this market being open to new technology in particular. And that's something that the government has only reinforced a couple of weeks ago with their own technology roadmap. So, for example, right now as we speak, we're building a new generation of wind turbine. It's the largest wind turbine on the planet, a 5 megawatt plus turbine unit with a split rotor blade. Now, the great news about all of that is throughout this whole pandemic, that site didn't stop work. So, we've been able to kind of keep activity going, to keep building and projects on the go. And for GE Australia, we've got this great opportunity of bringing, whether it's synchronous condensers or new wind turbine platforms to this market, whether it be storage and batteries, whether it be pumped hydro, whether it be fast start gas to help provide firming for renewable energy. All of these opportunities are here, and the great thing about Australia is we're generally early adopters. We've got a marketplace that I think people are willing to be innovative in. And I think if one thing I take away from this pandemic is people's focus on outcomes and innovation. And I suppose, kind of really peeling back some of the constraints that we might have seen under a business as normal proposition around actually delivering outcomes. So I think there's been a real focus that I've seen across industry, but also with government, to be able to really focus on making sure work keeps happening and activity is ongoing in this sector.
That's fantastic, Sam. Listen, Sam, thank you very much for your time today. I really do appreciate it. And I really appreciate your support as our platinum sponsor for our live conference, which of course has been moved to March of next year in Melbourne. And it's always a pleasure to speak with you.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. Always a pleasure. Stay safe and well, and we look forward to catching up in person at some point.
Absolutely.